all the game showcases came and went, and we have yet to see anything from Bungie in regards to Marathon. So what is happening with that? Because this is a game that is supposed to be coming out in September of this year, so you'd think we'd be seeing stuff about it. And what is happening with Bungie right now that is keeping them so quiet on this game? Well, if you missed it, there has been a plagiarism accusation thrown at Bungie in regards to Marathon, and we've also then been talking about what's really going on with the inner workings of the studio to cause an environment where something like that can happen. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Bungie is an interesting studio because it was obviously so closely tied to Halo, and when Bungie left Microsoft to do its own thing, I think a lot of people were hoping that Bungie was going to strike out on their own and really impress us with the stuff that they've made. And while there has been elements of that, they've also struggled in some other areas, like plagiarism. And I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, this is only one thing that's come up, right? Well, we're going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about what's going on with Marathon. So Marathon is a game that when I first heard about it, I took a look into it and I was like, yeah, that's kind of like just another extraction shooter. I feel like we have those. They've kind of become a dime a dozen at this point. But what I thought was interesting about the game was the look of it. I felt that the art direction, the aesthetic was really interesting and looked really fun. And it was something that I personally was like, oh, okay, well, it could be good. I mean, maybe it'll wow me with just the look of the game, and there'll be a lot more to it than what I'm seeing on the screen in terms of our first looks at this game. And I mean, one thing that we've always been able to say about Bungie, I think, is that the art direction has always been quite solid. Of course, now the question becomes, how much of that art direction was original? I guess. Even when people got to take a first look at this game and people were getting these sort of previews into it, the game was receiving mixed to negative feedback from people who were getting the opportunity to even look at it. It already wasn't doing well, and then what ended up happening was this kind of scandal broke. This was an accusation of plagiarism from Fern Hook, who is also known as N2, the artist ANTIREAL. N2 took to the platform formerly known as Twitter to say, the Marathon Alpha released recently and its environments are covered with assets lifted from poster designs I made in 2017. Well, maybe it's just a coincidence. N2 went on to say, showing more proof of this happening, yikes, Bungie is of course not obligated to hire me when making a game that draws overwhelmingly from the same design language I have refined over the last decade, but clearly my work was good enough to pillage for ideas and plaster all over their game without pay or attribution. And to basically accuse them of taking inspiration from her work, taking literal symbology from the work and just throwing it up everywhere. So their assets are basically covered in references and in some cases literal one-for-ones from her poster designs, her artwork. Within her artwork, she actually also hid a reference to the webcomic Lost from Control-Alt-Delete. And the crazy thing is too that people spotted that reference in the game, which is, I feel like, an insane confirmation that Bungie has literally taken from ANTIREAL's work. Like, taking a reference that was in the art and just having it in there, what are the odds? You know what I mean? Could it be a coincidence? Once you see something like that, I don't think it is. When it came to Bungie's response to this, they said that it was a former employee and that they were basically shocked, and they would of course be looking through and seeing what else may have been plagiarized and making amends on their end. So they have said, you know, we want to do right by the artist. We are going to go in and really comb through to make sure none of this has happened. It was a former employee. Whoops. I feel like that excuse, you know, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you, because weirdly, this is not the first time Bungie has used that excuse. Bungie has also used that excuse back in 2020 when they were accused of plagiarism, that it was a former employee, and oh my, and of course we'll be looking into it and fixing everything. And I mean, when they have been accused of these things, they have made amends. There was a time when they were basically accused of stealing fan art that was used as inspiration, or, you know, was very similar to what they ended up using for a Destiny 2 Nerf gun for merch. And they ended ended up paying the artist that made the fan art, which the artist was Tofu Rabbit, and in 2024, Bungie agreed to compensate them. So they have made amends when stuff like this has happened, but it's also so bizarre that it's happened multiple times, and yet other studios don't really seem to have as much of an issue with this happening regularly, and they definitely don't seem to have the issue that Bungie has, where they keep just saying, former employees. At some point, you have to kind of wonder what responsibility Bungie really has in terms of their inner workings as to how this can keep happening again and again. I mean, I guess you could say former employees maybe had it out for Bungie, and so before they left, they just plagiarized a bunch, but it seems more likely that there must be something pushing people to a place where they feel like that's all they can do. And it sounds like it might relate to the environment there. I think another point that I just want to add in when it comes to the whole ANTIREAL scandal is that when it comes to them taking ANTIREAL's work, it might still seem maybe coincidental to some, like maybe it could have just been a coincidence that some of these things happened. Even with the webcomic reference that's in there, you might still be trying to find a way to cope with this if you're a Bungie fan, and I get it. However, I think it's also important to acknowledge that apparently Joseph Cross, who's head of art direction for Marathon, also has been following the artist N2 on X as well. And this was something that was called out by another X user, and N2 responded saying, "He's followed me for a few years and a few others from Bungie. Never had any communication." Which is even more wild, because it's like, if you're a fan of this artist's work and maybe it's, you know, something that's inspiring you for your game, some people have said on Reddit that it could just be that, you know, Cross was showing the artwork to someone as a reference and they just decided to basically rip it. But I have to think that you normally wouldn't jump to that if you're an artist, the idea of just full on stealing someone's work. I think that there must be some kind of pressures that people are under at the studio to be pushed to a place to think that plagiarism is the best solution for working on this game. You don't get to a place like that unless it's like a really garbage person that's working there, but I just don't think that there could be that many of them. I just feel like that's unlikely, considering that I'm sure Bungie has a decent hiring process. I mean, hey, Bungie wasn't always a terrible studio. I don't even know if they're a terrible studio now. I think what they've done is terrible, and I think that the environment has become terrible, and I think that is why things like this keep happening with them. I mean, you could see it when they did the live stream. They had to do a live stream after to promote this, like basically around the time this story broke. And the faces that Cross is making throughout the live stream, going back and looking at some of that, and the chat that was running across the screen, just accusing them of plagiarism, it does not look like it was a fun time for them. And this extends beyond, I think, even just maybe Marathon. People have been talking about how at Bungie right now, morale is at an all-time low. And that has to do, of course, with this scandal. People are worried about the future of the studio. A lot is riding on Marathon, and if it doesn't do well, there might be no future for this studio. But other former employees have also been coming out and basically saying, look, it hasn't been great for some time. It likely even extends to before development on Marathon. But just even talking about Marathon, former employees have said that when it came to the development of Marathon, Marathon was actually a leadership pitch. So leaders at Bungie who have been around for a while were the ones that pitched this game, and they were the ones that were very close-minded when it came to actually getting feedback from their devs. So a lot of the devs were suggesting things and talking about what might not work based on ideas that their leadership had, and the leadership just shut everything down. They did not want the feedback. They did not want to hear it. The devs were trying to push for a PvE element and said, I think if we're doing this, we're going to need that in the game. Apparently, Bungie leadership was super resistant, according to reports that we've seen. And according to former staff, they believe that actually a lot of the issues that Bungie is experiencing now stems from this leadership issue, this idea of the culture of Bungie, which has become you don't question people. If you do, you're going to get shut down. There's no feedback is accepted here. It just sounds very toxic and like it would be a very difficult place to work, especially as a creative individual whose input should be valued. Devs, you should listen to devs. If you see great art, instead of trying to imitate that art, why don't you just email the artist and ask them, hey, we really like your art. Is there any way that you'd be willing to work with us on this game? Or could we, commission some stuff from you? I don't understand how you could be following someone for a few years and not think, maybe I should just reach out to that person. Maybe I should just bring them on my team. The staff have said when it comes to Bungie leadership, they are the ones who are basically ruled by greed, and they are just pushing for more and more monetization in games, not really focused on gamer experience. In fact, if something that is pro gamer experience would potentially hurt their bottom line, they would rather not do that. So that is something that has come up on development with Destiny 2, and of course, with Marathon, I think potentially we're also seeing that with the plagiarism here even. And even with just the gameplay that people have been talking about with it being lackluster. According to a quote from an interview that IGN did, one of the former employees said, "Everything happening to Bungie is because of greed. From a lack of player empathy, disconnected leadership, and a corporate-first culture. Everything comes back to that." And based on my experiences in work environments, I gotta say, I could see how that would lead to issues like what's happening with Marathon right now. When you're putting all this pressure on people to get everything right, but you're not listening to them in terms of what they believe won't work based on their own experience and their own skills, which you hired them for, it is going to push people to extremes. And that's where things like plagiarism can happen. And also, I do not know how you say a former employee is responsible for this when your head of art direction on the game is someone that would have been familiar, at least in some capacity, with the work. How did that get through at all? How was that not seen or caught? And especially if it was a conversation like some have suggested on Reddit to kind of cope with what's happening here, the idea that Cross maybe showed it to someone and they just copied it and Cross didn't realize that that's what happened. But how do you not realize if you're the one that gave the reference? That's the thing I don't understand. So I feel that something must be going on here where there's just more involvement in this from Bungie's side than they're letting on. I don't know if it's necessarily that they're like, yeah, just plagiarize, that's great, but there's definitely something going on within the culture of the workplace that needs to be fixed. This is like multiple cries for help in terms of these plagiarism scandals, but nothing is changing. It keeps happening, and it will keep happening unless Bungie takes a look at the studio, I believe, and really considers what kind of culture they want and where their focus really is. Honestly, I'm so tired of games that are just all about making money on gamers and not actually thinking about the gamer experience. If you make a great game, I believe you will make money from it. It's just, that is what it is. People love to play great games and they love to support them. You don't have to squeeze every penny out of every single gamer to get that, or every nickel. We don't even have pennies anymore. That's how bad it's getting. We're at the point now where just every little bit of money is what every game wants to get out of you, so that there's nothing left for anything else. Never mind basic necessities. What are those? When it comes to Marathon, everything has been really quiet. I mean, like I said, I watched a ton of the showcases. I watched Sony, which I thought maybe something would pop up there. Nope. Summer Games Fest, nothing was there. PC, nothing was there. I mean, obviously Xbox, nothing was there. So there's been no news, no mention of Marathon at all. And we still are believing that this game is going to come out in September because no one said it's going to be delayed. But I have to assume, based on the fact that we've seen nothing, they're doing a whole audit on it right now, Sony and Bungie, to get down to the bottom of this plagiarism issue. This game has to be delayed. And what that will mean for Bungie, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it's not looking good. That's all I have for this one. Let me know your thoughts on this controversy down in the comments below. What are you thinking about it? I mean, how do you feel about this whole plagiarism thing? I feel like it's got to be really challenging for artists today. It already is with everything that's AI. The silver lining here is that following the story up a little bit with N2 on their X page, they actually said they're completely overwhelmed by the response to this, the whole controversy. Thank you so much for the support, and especially to those who have donated. It helps enormously. So people have been reaching out and supporting ANTIREAL, supporting N2, and I love to see that. I feel like that is at least a silver lining that's come out of this, is at least the artist is getting some kind of compensation just through the gaming community and probably fellow artists that believe in what they're doing. So if you have the opportunity to, if you're on X and you want to throw N2 a follow, or if you are in a position where you could potentially donate to their work, or just an artist in general, just support art, because it's hard out here and people just trying to rip artists off. And let me tell you, a lot of people will say legally, when someone's taking your stuff, you should take action, all of these things. A lot of artists can't afford to do stuff like that. That's the reality. Legally, people like myself, people that are out there that are visual artists, I have a lot of friends that are visual artists, you just don't have the resources. So please support in any way that you can. And yeah, hopefully Bungie will do the right thing and they will compensate the artist, and hopefully they'll be able to work out the kinks in Marathon and it will be a great game for them. I hope that their culture changes. I hope that they actually listen to their devs. Just listen to your staff. It's not that hard, guys. Please. That's all I have for this one. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Until then, support art and stay nerdy. Bye!